They say nothing feels safer than your childhood home. I believed that, right up until the night everything changed. The scariest moment of my life wasn't on a dark street or in a dangerous neighborhood. It happened in the one place I thought I was safe. I grew up in a modest little house. For most of my childhood, I shared a room with my older brother. We had two twin beds on opposite sides, two dressers, and a pair of closets. There wasn't even enough space for a desk. It wasn't cramped, but it wasn't exactly comfortable either. So when my brother left for college, I wasted no time. With his blessing, I dragged his bed out and claimed the extra space for myself. At that age, having a desk was a must. Finally, I didn't have to do homework in the basement or cram into my dad's office upstairs. That setup worked perfectly for about 2 years, until I went off to college myself. After that, it didn't really matter anymore. When my brother graduated, he landed a city job close to our hometown. Naturally, he moved back into my parents' house. And what's the first thing he did? You guessed it, he took back our old room, the one I had spent months redecorating. At first, I was annoyed, but my parents reminded me that I had done the same thing to him earlier. They weren't wrong, so I let it slide. By the time I finished college, I also had a city job, which meant moving back in with my parents too. But unlike my brother, I didn't have a bedroom anymore. The only option left was the upstairs guest room. It was half the size of my old room, but it would have to do. The guest room was next to my dad's office, the only other space on that floor, and it sat directly above the garage. Whenever the garage door opened, the whole floor rattled. 10 long seconds. Since the room stuck out on the corner of the house, it had 2 windows on adjacent walls, one facing the driveway and the other looking out over the side yard. Not perfect by any means, but it was private and usually quiet.
One Friday night, everything changed. My brother was away in Baltimore for a work conference, and my parents were spending the weekend at our shore house like they always did in the summer. After a brutal day at work, I decided to stay in. No friends, no plans, just food delivery and an early night. Around 11:30, I was in bed, book in hand, letting the silence of the empty house calm me down. That's when I heard it. The garage door, the grinding motor, the floor shaking beneath me, the sound I'd gotten used to over the past few months. At first, it didn't register, but then it hit me. Nobody in my family was supposed to be home. My parents were gone until Sunday. My brother wasn't due back until the next afternoon. The moment that sunk in, my heart started pounding. I shot out of bed and peered through the window facing the driveway, but it was too dark to see clearly. The garage door was open, but I couldn't tell if a car was inside or who had triggered it. Panicked, I dug through the closet until I found an old baseball bat from my childhood. As I crept downstairs, I tried to convince myself there was some harmless explanation. Maybe my parents forgot something and came home early. Maybe my brother's plans changed. Maybe the door malfunctioned on its own. But when I reached the bottom of the stairs, I froze. I heard voices. Faint, muffled voices coming from the far side of the house, where all the bedrooms were. I couldn't make out words, but I could tell there were at least 2 people. That's when the truth hit me. Someone had broken in. I pulled out my phone and dialed 911 and whispered my address, telling the operator my house was being robbed. I left the line open and slipped the phone into my pocket. The dispatcher told me to stay hidden, stay quiet, don't move. But I couldn't. Some reckless, burning instinct told me I had to fight. So I ignored the instructions and went straight toward the danger. Gripping the bat tightly, I crept down the hallway. The closer I got to my parents' bedroom, the clearer the sounds became. Drawers sliding open, items being tossed around. They were searching for valuables. I knew what I was about to do was stupid, but there was no stopping myself. I screamed at the top of my lungs and charged into the room, back raised high. Two men spun around in shock. They hadn't expected anyone to be home, much less someone willing to fight. That hesitation gave me just enough courage. I swung hard, striking the closer man in the leg. He cursed, stumbled, and collapsed. I turned on the second intruder, but before I could swing again, he barreled into me, tackling me to the floor. He was bigger, stronger. He wrestled the bat from my hands and clamped his fingers around my throat. I kicked and clawed, gasping for air, when I saw the first guy crawling toward me, a knife glinting in his hand. In that moment, I knew I had made the worst mistake of my life. I wasn't going to make it out.
There, I truly believed these were my final moments. I thought about my mom, how devastated she'd be when she found out, and then sirens. Faint at first, but growing louder. The last thing I saw was the second man raising my own bat above me. Then everything went black. When I came to, a police officer was kneeling beside me, shaking me awake. I was dazed, confused, struggling to remember what had just happened. The back door of my parents' room was wide open. The intruders had fled the moment they heard the sirens. The officer told me not to move in case I had a concussion. My head throbbed, but I was conscious. The paramedics wanted me to go to the hospital, but I refused. I gave the police a full account, but by the time they arrived, the burglars were long gone. Later, I called my parents and brother. My parents yelled at me, and they were right. If I had stayed hidden, the cops might have caught them. The burglars were never found. The police canvassed the neighborhood, followed leads, but nothing. The moment my parents came home, they installed a full security system. Cameras, lights, motion sensors, the whole package. Still, something about it all haunted me. The house was locked. The only way to open the garage was through a wireless button my dad had programmed in my car. That meant whoever broke in knew about it. They knew my car was usually unlocked in the driveway. And they knew my parents would be away if my brother out of town. It wasn't random. It was personal. I don't live there anymore, but my dad stayed paranoid for a long time, convinced it was someone close to us. I won't say that night changed me forever, but I will say this. Life before you accepted death and life after are two very different things. I can still feel it, that cold, dissociating moment where I believed it was the end. Nothing else compares.